The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. Sean Haney here with RealAgriculture.com. It's time for an episode of the Canola School. Joining me right now is Leighton Blashko. He is a senior tech specialist with BASF. Leighton, how's it going?
It's going really well, Sean. How about you?
Doing fantastic. Let's talk about clubroot. This is really one of the diseases, I think, that creates the biggest challenge for canola acres on the prairies. Obviously, growers of other brassica species have dealt with this issue in other parts of Europe, but prairie is relatively a new challenge for the most part. It was kind of confined to certain areas and certain conditions. Give us a bit of an update on how big of a geography it actually covers now, that where growers are really having to deal with infections of clubroot.
Yeah, you bet, Sean. I guess for me, being situated around the Edmonton area, I particularly have been dealing with it with growers for quite a few years. In this area, people always thought of it maybe as a northern Alberta or around Edmonton area problem, but it has always been slowly spreading. The number of cases, whether it's right around Edmonton, are increasing every year. But then also I guess you kind of call it the leading edge of this problem, is moving further and further away from this traditional area. So now, we've seen it in Manitoba, we've seen it in Saskatchewan. I don't have the exact numbers on the number of fields, and that will depend on how much you're looking for it. But it certainly is becoming a problem for more and more areas. As well, I don't want to leave out southern Alberta, so moving north to the Peace Country. So generally, I would say there's a heightened awareness everywhere that canola is grown in Western Canada.
Yeah, and how are growers identifying it? You mentioned the testing, but we've all seen some of the photos where somebody holds up a stalk or has the root. It's got those galls there. Is that really the only way to identify it?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things you can do. There are lab tests where you can send in some soil which tests for the presence of DNA, or you can look at plants and actually look for the symptoms on the roots that you mentioned, those big gall-like symptoms. And so those are kind of both ends of the spectrum. From one end of the spectrum, the soil testing, it's, I guess, just like anything, it depends on how much you would sample, how diligent you are in sampling, and where you exactly maybe take that soil core to see whether you would find it or not find it. So if we were able to sample, extremely close grid sampling every square foot, which would be not very practical, you're more likely to find a sample rather than doing one core per quarter section, as an example. So, it comes down to sampling. And then the other method, which is probably more, I would suggest, what we really should be doing is increasing our scouting in the field. And we would be doing that primarily about the time that you would normally cut a canola crop if you were swathing. So just as you're starting to get some color change, mid-color change, that's when you should be starting to look at the roots, pulling up a bunch of plants. And when I say pulling up a bunch of plants, I do mean a bunch, not just going in and pulling up 3 or 4 plants and saying, okay, yes, I have it, or no, I don't. You want to really pull a lot of plants. So that's how peak growers are identifying it. They're maybe seeing something strange in their field. For the most part, they see a little patch that just looks a little bit off. It may not be in a lowest area where they say, okay, it's drowned out. It might be more in a mid-slope. They say, that shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be water shouldn't have been the issue there. So whether it's something that's an obvious place where you think canola is or isn't going to be healthy, look there, but also look in areas where you think maybe it shouldn't be clubroot causing an issue.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Is we talked about the below ground symptoms you're looking for, but what are some of those above the ground symptoms that were kind of? And you just basically we just go on. It looks off.
Yeah, I think so. You'll start to see that anytime you have roots constricting the flow of nutrients, water to the plant, that plant looks like it's prematurely wilting. If in severe cases, it's so it restricts the flow of nutrients so much that the plant just starts to really shrivel and you get premature ripening. So, someone described it almost like a skeleton, if you would say, of canola. It's not really a normal, robust plant.
What about best management practices? I know we've kind of shifted from our original best management practices when we first found clubroot in that Edmonton area. What are some of the things that growers they're recommended to be doing as we head out to the field?
Well, I think there's a number of things that we need to be doing. And first and foremost, I guess I would say that, you need to look at the sustainability of canola as your ultimate goal. So don't just rely on one best management practice, but really have a whole integrated plan. So a holistic management plan. And that, the Canola Council identified a number of things that, that you can look at. And those start with your soil, then you're looking at seed, your rotation, scouting, maybe some amendments like lime that there's some research on right now. Look at your field entrances and also think about your weeds. So if you think about those, I think 7 items that I just mentioned, there's a lot. If you think about those and delve quite deeply into each of those, that's going to be key. So as an example, we would say, crop rotation is going to be paramount. That is absolutely key. You're right that there's some new information there. We used to, when clubroot was relatively new to Western Canada, there was some reports that you may have to be out of canola production for, 7 years, 20 years. It was these really scary numbers. And producers are thinking like, oh my gosh, I can't manage to do that. Then they thought, well, maybe it's a 4-year rotation. So canola, then 3 other crops before you're back into, say, a canola. Again, that's pretty hard in a lot of areas to manage with the crop choices that we have. So then some research came out. The latest research suggests that if you have a 2-year break between canola, so it's a 3-year rotation, that will reduce the viable spores just about as much as a 4-year rotation. So that was very valuable information for producers to be able to move to, ask them to, instead of in the worst, I'd say some of the worst case scenarios where you have like a wheat canola rotation, if they can add in one more crop, that's pretty palatable. And producers are starting to realize that, rotation is it's something that they can deploy on their farm.
I think one of the positives that has developed too, as we see more and more cases, is that it becomes less of a stigma, right? Where growers are sharing a lot more information. It's okay to admit that you have clubroot on your farm, whereas before it was like, don't test, won't find. Whereas now it's become much more of a, okay, how are we actually going to manage through this? And I think that change in attitude has really helped.
I agree. I think, producers now, anyone, especially in the areas where we've been dealing with it for quite a few years, it's pretty common. If you don't have it, maybe it's because you really aren't doing enough of a job of scouting, looking for it. If you look hard enough, you'll probably find it in these areas. And then as we go to, we're starting to release or let that information be known to brand new areas that, hey, it's not something that you can never expect to find on your farm. It's probably something you will find. So look for it early. If you have it, employ some of these or deploy some of these tactics. Let your neighbors know. Because if you can help them or if they can help you, it's only going to help slow the spread.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main questions that I think a lot of growers ask is, okay, I have fields where I've looked for it, cannot find it. Should I still be seeding a clubroot variety on those fields even though I don't have it?
Well, I think, over the years, there's probably been a little bit of shift in this. Initially, there wasn't, it was still confined to a small area. And there was lots and lots of parts of Western Canada where you could still grow non-clubroot resistant canola hybrids. That slowly has changed as the problem has spread, and there's getting fewer and fewer places where you can grow non-clubroot hybrids. Now we're at the point where there's, quite a big part of the geography where I would say you do want to use genetics. It's probably still not everywhere, because there's some areas where it just is not, has not been found. It's not in your community. It's not within quite a long distance. So growers in those areas are still probably making decisions to choose what they feel is the best hybrid. And maybe there's other traits that they want to use. Maybe they want to focus on straight cutting hybrid or something with better standability than maybe the choices that they might have for clubroot. And that said, I guess it also takes the seed companies, us being one of them, a bit of time to adjust. We could not just adjust to and change all of a sudden all of our seed over to clubroot hybrids in a matter of 1 or 2 years. Yeah. So we're slowly making that change. It's getting there to the point where there's more and more, and probably, fairly soon, it's going to be where it's going to be almost everywhere. Now, to further clarify that, we're trying to put together a bit of a flow chart. Have you seen clubroot? Have you not? Going down a bit of a flow chart where you can kind of answer a series of questions, and then it gives you an idea of, okay, this is what we know from a technical standpoint is the best choice for you. And lots of times, the vast majority of those times, it probably is that you're going to be growing a clubroot-resistant hybrid. But there are, still a few cases where you may choose another hybrid.
And it is a team approach, right? So in dealing with clubroot, it's aggressive. We've seen the disease, basically adapt itself and spread as it spread across the prairies. So it is a team approach. We cannot fall back on, seed company ABC is going to develop a new resistant line to help me out of this. So I'm just going to keep on going canola, wheat, canola, wheat, canola, wheat, or maybe canola, canola, canola. Growers and the industry have a part in this best management practice.
Absolutely. I mean, it definitely is all hands on deck. We need to make sure that everybody is aware of the problem. Putting your head in the sand is, only going to exacerbate the problem. The key thing with managing clubroot and how severe it will impact your farm or your particular field is managing spore populations, managing that spore load. If you do an amazing job of scouting and you find it with only, a few plants near an entrance with very, very small galls, and then you deploy some of these strategies, you're going to be much better off than waiting until you first see the patch and it's 1 acre or 5 acres in size. So one plant versus, an acre or 5 acres is extremely, exponentially different problem in terms of number of spores. And that's why even one of the newer things that came out of International Clubroot workshop here in Edmonton a couple years ago was the concept of patch management. So that was never really thought about or discussed as a strategy. But the patch management of clubroot means if you find it in a field for the very first time on your farm, and it's a small area, maybe it's the size of your pickup truck, or maybe it's even smaller, or maybe it's even 1 acre, let's say. That's still pretty small compared to the acres you're farming. If you can pull all those plants while those galls are still not come out of the soil nicely, you can bag them or destroy them through burning methods, and you can get rid of those plants. This sounded ridiculous to some people initially when you say, man, I'm going to pull out plants on, an acre. Are you absolutely out of your mind? But I honestly think if you can reduce that spore population, just think about it, Sean. One canola plant can have, the research shows it can have 16 billion spores in the roots of one infected canola plant. If you can get rid of that over an acre or that small size patch, and then what you do with that patch is you don't farm through it, so you don't run equipment through it, you seed grass on it, you manage that completely separate, take that out of production for a number of years, maybe consider some liming. If you can do a lot of different strategies for that patch, you're just going to help yourself out in the long run. So it is a team approach, but it's also, what you do specifically on your farm quickly at the early stages that's going to pay the biggest dividends.
Yeah, pulling hundreds of plants, it's very similar to what we've seen in the management of a weed like Palmer amaranth, right, where people go in and remove them by hand. It sounds terrible and like a lot of work, but it is. But we have to have all options available to us in fighting a disease like clubroot. Hey, Leighton, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, Sean.
You can find more episodes of the Canola School by going to canolaschool.com.